Born and raised in Western Canada, Mackenzie knew she wanted to be a photographer after she first stepped into the darkroom at the age of 12. Her teenage fascination with photography led her to study multimedia at the Emily Carr University of Art and Design in Vancouver. After teaching photography for a few years, she continued her studies, completing her MFA at Concordia University in Montreal. Mackenzie loves portraiture in its many different forms, playful and energetic to intimate and introspective. And she is equally at home in the studio or on location. Whether photographing an actor, author, politician, or someone with a story to tell, she aims to create an atmosphere where subjects feel at ease and authentic images can be made. Mackenzie is also a teacher at Cooper Union School of Art in New York City, and her client list includes New York Magazine, The Hollywood Reporter, Entertainment Weekly, Billboard, The Sunday Times Magazine, Travel and Leisure, Fast Company, Uniqlo, and many more. So welcome, Mackenzie.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm just so excited to have you here and to be able to ask you some questions. And in particular, because you do photography, I feel like photography is a really interesting art form in that it's quite invisible in a lot of ways. And you can tell me if you agree with that or not, but like photography is really about being a silent partner, being the unknown director sort of of a shot and moment, and you kind of have to remain invisible as an artist. And so it's exciting for me to talk to you because I feel like we can pull back the veil around photography a little bit and sort of realize how much, skill and like spontaneity and creativity does go into image making.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think photography is at a real kind of transition right now because we all have access to a camera in our phones. And so with things like Instagram and that, there's just like, it's kind of ubiquitous, it's everywhere. So, we in some ways, everybody's a photographer, but there is a certain level of skill involved in terms of doing bigger shoots or more difficult subjects. It's great to see the access being opened up to a lot more people, a lot more diversity. And I think that's very, very important, especially right now. But I think, yeah, there is like this idea that things just happen, like the photo just took itself, where really it's so much goes in behind the scenes. And really with portrait photography, it's really about the rapport between subject and photographer.
So can you just describe your photo practice a bit?
Yeah, I would consider myself like an editorial, advertising, commercial photographer. I come from a fine art background, and I think my goal was always to be a conceptual artist. Like I really wanted to be like a Jeff Wall, Cindy Sherman, any one of those big, high lofty goals for sure. But I think, and I went to do my MFA thinking that that's kind of the road I would go down, is trying to be pursuing a gallery, trying to show my work. And I think I kind of quickly realized how challenging that is in any realm. Like those people are really unique. And not that I didn't want to pursue that, but when I moved to New York, which I moved to New York 17 years ago, I think I realized really quickly, I had to pay the rent. And I had started in Canada when I was doing my MFA. Even before I did my MFA, I started in Vancouver when I lived there. I had started doing some editorial shoots that, photo editors had asked me like, hey, can you shoot this portrait in your style? Can you shoot this portrait? And I would say, sure, not thinking of that as a really viable career. And then slowly when I did my MFA, I kind of supported myself through art school, doing editorial projects where somebody would call me back in the day of like Saturday Night Magazine, would call me and ask me to shoot portraits. And so I started to kind of get my feet wet a little bit and get some connections in that world. And then I realized how much I enjoyed it. And then when I moved to New York, I think I slowly started to get into that world here. And I realized like I not only really love it, but it's a great way to make a living and to make friends because, I didn't know a lot of people down here. And it just kind of went from there, where it just kind of progressed. So now, as much as I, would love to still be the Jeff Wall or something, I think I'm super happy doing the work that I do. I think I still approach my shoots from kind of an artistic background, which I think my my training, my kind of art history background, all of that has helped me a lot. But you know, it's not like a gallery path by any means. It's much more like a, you know, where I get hired by people, I get commissioned by people, and I try to do my thing in that context.
So you've photographed many, many, many people. You've photographed politicians, scientists, actors, entrepreneurs, artists, and everyday people. What have you really learned about people doing this type of work?
There's so much. Honestly, there's a lot. I think, you know, I'm definitely a control freak kind of person, you know. I like to have things a certain way. And I think the number one thing if you're photographing people is you just don't know what's going to happen. And so I always plan ahead for every job. Like, I think I do my research. I try to think what's going to happen. What are the things that could happen? Where's the location? I do everything I can to kind of figure out what the problems might be beforehand. And then inevitably you go and you meet this person that you're photographing, or people, or whoever it is, and they might be so opposite of what you expected. I've had many actors or actresses that I've thought, oh, they're going to be amazing, and they're maybe really, really difficult, or people that I thought, oh, this person might not be that interesting, and then they're amazing and they just have a great chemistry. So I think that's one of the main things for sure, is just not to kind of put your judgment aside and enter it with kind of like an open mind is probably the biggest thing I've learned, is just to kind of embrace the experience, whatever that may be, because you really don't know.
Yeah, that sounds like almost like a Zen challenge in a way, because you have to be completely prepared and think about everything beforehand, but also enter just like and be completely present as well.
Yeah,
So it's like both talents.
Yeah. I always hire the very best assistants, the very best tech. You know, I just am like, let me surround myself with the best people I possibly can, so that you set yourself up for success.
So when you say you want to hire the best assistant, what are the characteristics that make them good?
You know, that depends. It depends a little bit on the shoot, but for me, because I do portraits, I think the best assistant is somebody who brings a really good energy. I know that sounds kind of like a little bit, you know, I don't know.
No, it sounds like it 100% sounds,
it's
like good with people, right? You need to be good with people.
I've had assistants that are amazing assistants in terms of their technical ability, but they're just a dead energy on set. They're not paying attention, or they're not enjoying the process. And I've had the opposite, where I've had assistants that are super keen and eager and really present, and they're maybe not as great technically. I would 10 times rather take that person on a shoot, and I have many times, because I just am like, it is so important that when I'm doing portraits, that it is something that is about an exchange, and it's not about, you know, I can figure out the technical on my own for the most part. It's mostly just having that good vibe around you, having that good energy, and the feeling really supported. You can't, like, that's the key for me.
Yeah, that's
and ideally you have both. And I have many people in New York that I work with that have like amazing personalities, and they're also incredible technicians.
When you go into a set, how do you distill the essence of a person quickly? Because I know those timelines are really short. So when you're trying to get like that beautiful image, how do you do it? Like, how do you do it in such a short period of time?
Yeah, I mean, that is one thing, especially if someone is interested in getting into celebrity or kind of these bigger portraits of politicians or something. I've had shoots where I've seriously had 10 frames of a person, and that's it. And you know that you're getting 10 frames, or you might have beforehand 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but you have 3 setups. So I don't know that you can always guarantee that, but one thing I always do, and this is what, you know, anybody who works in my kind of realm does, is you get there as far in advance as you can. You set up the lighting or whatever you're doing. Even if you use natural light, you figure all that out beforehand. Same thing, preparation, so that the second that person walks on set, you are just ready to interact. And
Mm-hmm.
I think in that moment, I don't want to be thinking like, is this light turned on, or like, that is
Yeah.
not where I want my mind to be. Sometimes it has to be, because that's also happening. And I've had shoots where, we just have to walk in and start shooting. We don't get time to prep. So that's different. But if there's an opportunity to pre-light, to get in there beforehand, I do it. And then really it's just the exchange. And sometimes the exchange, like, photos are very deceiving because they're just like this one moment in time. And people say, oh, that's such a great portrait. And I'd be like, oh my God, that person was a nightmare. And you would never know, like, or like, and sometimes it's not a great portrait, to be honest. I've had people that are amazing energy in person, and it doesn't always transpire. It is really, it's my job to try to get as much as I can out of that person, but not every shoot is a super success. Like, just, it's not. I've got a million bad shoots in my, you see a lot on the website, and then you don't see a lot because some of them are just not that great.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. No, I mean, I think the ratio of like making one good piece of art to, all the stuff you've tried is like 50-1 or whatever, it's like, you got to make a lot of duds before you make that beautiful one, but you got to be there. You got to show up, you got to be there. Who has been one of your all-time favorite subjects to photograph, and why?
I have a lot. There's a lot of people that I've really loved. I think one of the favorite people is for sure Stephen Hawking, because I think it's hard for me to separate the image from the experience. And I think for that shoot, just because I flew by myself to London, and then I drove up to Cambridge, and he was really sick at the time, and so we didn't know if we would get to shoot him at all. Like, I came all this way, and then there was this very real possibility that we might not even get to photograph him. And so I think we waited like 5 or 6 hours just in the lobby, just waiting for the word. And then when we finally got the word that yes, he would show up for maybe 15 minutes. We just got shoved in this room full of chairs. It was a classroom. So thank God I had a great assistant with me that I knew from New York that had come over from Berlin, and we just shoved the chairs aside, put up the light. Like, we had no time to set up, but he was just, he really had so much character. Even though, you think he's immobile, you think, how does that transpire? But he really did. And I think it was just a really humbling moment for me, just to realize how powerful, like, even his gaze was. I think one thing that his assistant told me after, we did 2 shots, we were really fast, we didn't waste his time, but she did say to me after, like, thank you for talking to him like he's not a child. Because she said, I've had so many photographers treat him, because he can't talk back, that he's not like this brilliant human being. And I was so dumbfounded, like, by that. I was like, how is that even possible, right? But it happens sometimes. Like, you have to be careful how you interact with people and be super respectful.
Tell me about one of the most challenging jobs you've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, a shoot can be challenging in lots of different ways. I think one of the most memorable shoots I've had that has been challenging was the Mikhail Baryshnikov, because I had not a lot of time to set up. I couldn't scout beforehand. So we had to just arrive with what equipment we thought we needed. And we were supposed to have 2 hours to set up and light and be ready for him to walk on and give us like 10 minutes. And instead, his assistant came and said, you know what, we need you to shoot in like 5 minutes. He was not feeling well. We need to shoot right away. And that happens all the time, where they're like, you know what, they changed their mind. They want to go now. So all of a sudden we're like shoving our equipment in the studio, we're scrambling. And I had spent seriously hours and hours doing a playlist for him, because I do playlists for every shoot. And he walks in unannounced, and the first thing he says to me is, what is this horrible music? And I was kind of like crushed right away, because I'm like, oh my God, I spent like hours researching and seeing what music you might like. And then he just cut me down. So I was like, okay, I turn off the music. And then he said, I want to shoot right now. And I was like, okay. So, thank God for very agile assistants, because we just scrambled, and he, I knew what I wanted to shoot. I figured it out in like 2 seconds. Yeah. And one of the shots was kind of, again, in the studio. And we did that shot, but I asked him to do some gesture, and he just wasn't having it. He didn't want to do it. And then the second setup we did, we had to do another tighter shot, and same thing. Like, he, sometimes you just get what you get. Like, you can't predict how a person is going to react or how difficult they might be. And, you know, it didn't matter that we didn't have a lot of time with him because he's so incredibly charismatic that it just like you could shoot 5 frames and you could get it.
So how does your commercial work affect your art practice and vice versa?
You know, I think the biggest impact in terms of the commercial work is when I moved to New York, I was mostly just doing projects and series and all of that. And then when I got here, it's just so hard to be a successful photographer here that I put so much energy into the commercial practice. So I think now I'm kind of swinging back the other direction where I'm spending more time on personal work. I'm really, they have to feed each other. And I think that that's easy to forget about when you get wrapped up in the busyness of the New York kind of photo world. So I'm spending a lot more time thinking about what I want to shoot, what projects I want to shoot, trying to do more personal work. I think I'm very, very glad, even though I will say art school, especially my MFA, technically didn't teach me anything.
Yeah.
Just because that's not what they're there to do. It's really like, that's not the main focus. Anybody can learn the technical, but to hone your conceptual skills is a lot harder. So I'm really grateful I came from that kind of background into the world of more commercial photography, because every time I go to a shoot, I think of it, you know, much differently than if I were just thinking of it as a technician. You know, whether that shows or not, I'm not sure, but I definitely feel like I'm really grateful that I have an art background and that I did, you know, all of those years of photo school.
But
although
you know,
sometimes I'm like, what?
To be honest, like if you put portraiture in like the history of art, you know, or if you look at it within the context of the history, art history, is just that portraiture is about like, you know, people have been taking portraits or painting portraits of like religious figures, the, you know, elite, you know, people who shape society, you know, forever. And now it's done in photography. Like, but you are basically in that lineage, right? You're following that lineage, and you're the way you're functioning is how a painter would have painted like the kings and stuff, you know, now in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, I'm a modern day Rembrandt. Like,
well, but it's true.
No, I don't. But
honestly,
no,
it
I mean,
is true.
those painters did do commissions, and I think that that's a lot of times we forget that is that, and I think it's easy for artists, especially going through art school. When I look back, I was very naive about how hard it is to sustain a practice in terms of financially and emotionally and all of that. It's like a long haul. So you have to think like, you know, not just about like your career in terms of what you love to do, but also in your career in terms of how can you sustain it. And it's yeah, that's one of the ways you can, for sure. And you don't have to necessarily give up your voice. It's just that you have to find a way to make it work, you know?
It's interesting. You know, I follow you on Instagram, so I know that like you have been to a lot of protests lately. You have documented those things. I know that that's not on your site, but I know that you're doing a lot of work. You know, you're photographing and documenting these events that are happening around you. You know, so it seems that your, you know, who you are and your voice is still very much a part of like what you're doing, and it's good to know that, you know, a person like you is documenting and photographing these people that are, you know, shaping our world in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting. When the Me Too movement happened, I got so many calls to photograph those women, a lot of those women, and I always thought of it like as such an honor, because I'm like, wow, this takes a lot of courage, you know. And I think right now there's so many people doing amazing work. I'm glad that it's being recognized, and so it's important. I think it's important to document these events. I don't think that, you know, I've gone to a few things, but I think there's a ton of amazing images that are coming out of this moment that I think are going to live long beyond it. And I think it's going to be a real testament to what's happening right now.
Mackenzie, let's take a look at one or two of your shoots, break it down, and maybe you can just deconstruct it for us and tell us what happened within it. Do you have one you want to talk about?
It was a shoot that I probably photographed 120 people in. But that shoot, I think I would say for people that are learning about production and how to produce a shoot, I think it's an interesting one just because, you know, it all starts with somebody, a photo editor, calling and say, hey, are you interested in doing this? And the premise of the shoot is to photograph all these actors and these people coming through a festival. So a lot of these festival shoots, like a lot of photographers do, like Toronto Film Fest or whatever. I mean, these are not happening for a while now, but when you get called to do that, you basically know that you're going to be in a room and people are just going to come in and out, and it's a very rapid way of shooting. So that I kind of knew that what the constraints were, like super speedy, like maybe you have a minute with people, maybe not even a minute, and you have to get as many good shots as you can. So on the technical side of that, you know, the first thing you do is kind of set like what kind of look you're going for, what kind of vibe you want.
Right.
And I send the photo editor a mood board of kind of like, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I feel like is going to be interesting in this environment. And then we kind of go back and forth, like, I like this idea, what about this? What about we try this? How about this? We move on to what does the set look like? Because we're going to build a set. So then we go on to what does the set design look like? The challenging thing about that shoot was that it was not only were we shooting stills of the actors as they came through, they were also doing video. So the video team would have like 4 videos across, and then I would jump in and jump out of the shot. Which sounds like, oh, this is not that bad, but you can imagine like how much equipment is involved in that, and they don't move their cameras, so it limits the angles. So that was the general, structure of it. And then you do tons and tons of prep for weeks, just sorting out what you want to do, and then you get there and you build the set. You have the set comes in, you do the equipment, you do the lighting tests, and I think the technical part of that is just being able to, have this energy for each person that comes on, and you have to stay kind of fresh and energized because people definitely feed off of how you're feeling. So if I were to walk on with low energy, people would feel that. So staying kind of up and engaged for whatever 12 hours, a long day. And we did that for 3 days. So that was a long one, but it was also one of the most fun shoots I've done because so many cool people, and it was a TV festival, so a lot of times it's not super well-known actors, and the beauty of that is a lot of those people are so excited to be featured and photographed. They are so game, and I love nothing more than taking advantage of that. Like, oh, you want to be photographed? Great, let's do it.
So I love the Seth Meyers cover photo shoot. I was so proud because I was like, oh, I know who took that photo. So can you tell me about that one?
Yeah, that's actually another fun one. So the photo director, Jeannie Graves, is amazing, and I've known her for a long time. And she called me and said, do you want to photograph Seth Meyers? And I was like, yeah, of course I want to photograph him. He's amazing.
Yeah.
So the issue with people like that, which is, very common in that world, is a lot of times, they're not monkeys that just perform for you. You have to kind of get them on board to your idea. And so you can't just expect, people think that actors are super open and do anything. That's just really not the case. Like, he's not really an actor. He's more of a, he's an entertainer, but it's much more political commentary, humor. So I had, we kind of same thing. We set up a mood board. I say, this is the lighting I want to do. This is the kind of vibe we want to do. And I really wanted to do something kind of fun and funny. And it was about him being creative, but props can go wrong very, very quickly. And a lot of people won't do props. Like, they just think they'll look stupid. So I spent a week like sourcing props all over the place, pulling them, getting, going to rental houses and just figuring out what I wanted to do. And then the shoot itself, it was kind of, just like he comes in, he's got his team that styles him. And it takes a while for people to warm up to the idea. And a lot of the props he saw, he was not keen on, which I get it. But I've kind of learned, just through photographing a lot of people, you just let people figure it out. Like, once you get their confidence, once they start to see that, okay, you're not an idiot and you kind of know what you're doing, then they tend to be a lot more generous with their energy. And
Mm-hmm.
I think if they get excited about the images that you're doing, then they're much more game to participate. So
Mm-hmm.
he thankfully was happy with what we were shooting. And then the more I was like, what if you grab this? How about you grab that? Maybe if you grab this giant pencil, like, you know, you kind of like work up to the suggestions. Like if I had started with the giant pencil, he probably would have said no. But he was awesome. He, in the end, he gave us a good amount of time, and he totally, you know, I wasn't going to push him and ask him to jump. I thought that would probably just push him over the edge. And he suggested it. He was like, what if I jump? And I was like, yeah, great. Like, it's like, oh my God, yes, of course. Like, that's what I wanted. But it's almost like you have to like will it. You're like, please let him like be into this. It doesn't always work out, but yeah, it was so fun. And he was really super awesome.
And Seth Meyers has had a lot of writers on his show. He really supports writers, and he supports writers with diverse voices. And yeah, he is really cool.
And he, you know, this doesn't happen very often, but he wrote me months later and said thank you. And he really liked those photos, and that never happens. And so I was really touched by that. And it was like, I wrote him and I said, thank you. Like very rarely do people reach out and say, oh, I really liked how that turned out. When I look back on my career specifically, I think I wish I had been a little more bold and aggressive in terms of seeking out the jobs I really wanted to do. I think I lacked a lot of confidence, especially coming to New York. I was super intimidated. I was really kind of scared, like I didn't know anybody. So it took me a long time to get my confidence up. And even now sometimes I'm like, I never really have reached out to people. Like I've kind of waited a lot for work to come my way in some ways. So I think you have to be really single-minded about it and just go for it and put your worries aside, you know, about being, I think it's just like fear of failure, which sounds, I know like everybody probably fears that in some ways, but I think don't be afraid to make mistakes, you know, just do the work and do the best you can. And go, just like really like have confidence. If you love the work that you're doing, have confidence that it's going to get through.
So when you say like throw yourself into it a little bit more, do you kind of mean, so, you know, like you don't feel ready or you're not feeling confident, but you just need to just go and ask for it because you didn't do that? Like you didn't ask for what you wanted. You didn't go after the job, or...
I see a lot of people that think they know what they're doing and they really don't. And I'm like, God, they just bolster through. They just go for it, right? And I'm like, God, just go for it. And I mean, not to say to be overly confident or cocky or anything like that, but just, you know, if you know your stuff and you know what you like to shoot and you have worked on it, then trust that you will know what to do on those shoots and trust that you know how you want it to turn out. So I think now I go into shoots and I'm like I'm much more firm in what I want. I mean, I'm flexible because I know things are always changing, but I'm much more like, yeah, this is the look I'm going for. This is what I want to do. And like, let's go for it. Like, let's do everything we can to do it. And no matter what, every shoot, I never have phoned it in. And I think that's an important thing. Like whether it was like the smallest little shoot for Time Out magazine when I first moved to New York or something big, it's like, you got to do 110% every time. And you may think this is a small job, doesn't matter. It's like totally, you can still make amazing images no matter what. I'm like, you have to actually shoot a lot to get really good. And so it's like, you know, if you look at people in the photo world who are really successful in terms of their style and how they've evolved, it's people that shoot all the time. I'm not talking about they shoot for, you know, commercially. I'm talking about people that are super committed to figuring out how they want to shoot and what they do and evolving. And those people work all the time on their own practice. And that's, I think, really important for younger people to realize is like, it's not a given that you're going to shoot the Toyota campaign or whatever. Like you have to, you know, really figure out what you want to do.
I feel like I could talk to you forever because I have lots of questions, but could you assign us an art prompt, some kind of creative exercise that we can go off and give a try?
Pick somebody you want to do a portrait of, and figure out what you want to convey before you do it. So if you want it to be moody, you want it to be happy, you want it to be whatever, whimsical or like surreal or whatever, and then figure out a way to direct that person to get those results. So focus on how are you controlling the image in your direction. A lot of that is so important in portraiture, is figuring out how to kind of tap into people's energy. So kind of figure out, what does the person need for you to get what you need out of this portrait. So maybe it's like silhouetted against the wind. I don't know. Just play with how you direct them and how you place them, and really looking at the light.
And what are, like, give me like a list of skills or qualities that you would recommend for all photographers.
You know, be an observer, right? Number one, whether you're doing still life or whether you're doing portraiture or something, your job is to observe, you know, and to figure it out. Like, I'm constantly, it's kind of annoying sometimes how I'll constantly be watching what the light is doing or paying attention to what a gesture is doing or whatever. I think being open to evolution of your work. So experiment, like, don't always stay stuck in the same type of way of approaching something. I think that's, as I get older, the more I experiment, and I think the work gets better as you push yourself in your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And then I think just like for portrait people, I feel it's really important to respect your subjects, like whoever they are, whatever they are, to mm-hmm. approach them with the same kind of, you know, kind of respect that you would no matter who they are, celebrity or whatever, just like to be really just yourself in the moment, and yeah, just see where things go. I think that's the one thing, is like being open and receptive and letting things evolve is really important in portrait work.
Mackenzie, I'm so glad that you are one of the voices that are out there taking photographs and creating content, because I know you have so much integrity, and I'm just so thrilled that you were able to talk to us today.
Thank you. So fun.
Where can we find you online?
My website, mm-hmm. which is just mackenziestroh.com. On Instagram, mackenzie.stroh. Mackenzie.stroh. And then I have an agent, DMB Represents, in London and New York, and that's another place you can find me. But most of my work is on my website.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, lady.
All right.
Good to talk to you.